Ah, good evening. If it's true, as we sometimes hear, that there's a mystical connection between music and mathematics, then my guest tonight is a case in point, or a case in counterpoint, or something. Sorry about that. But on the one hand, he has most of a PhD in mathematics, and on the other hand, and much more publicly, he has been, for the past decade, one of our freshest, most gifted, most, inventive musicians in the pop field. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Art Garfunkel. I cannot tell you how impressed I am with that, as one who barely made it through geometry by cheating, by looking on Nancy Salter's paper in high school. What does this mean, that you have half of a PhD, and why?
My college education's confusing. It went through a lot of changes. For a while, I was going to be an architect.
Yeah.
But when I gave it up and returned to Columbia College and took a general course, they had to give me some major, so they said your architecture will serve as an art history major. Then I stayed in school after I got my bachelor's and went on to prepare for teaching, because I had supported myself through my earlier years by tutoring, and I was tutoring mathematics, so that was...
You were not rich and independent and playboy
No.
as a student.
No.
People talk about, I don't know what writer it was telling me that, yes, on the show, in fact, an old show, that there's a pleasure in mathematics that is so aesthetic, if you can say that. What am I trying to say? That mathematics has a kind of pleasure to it that can only be found also in music and perhaps in art in some ways, and that there's an almost sensual pleasure in escaping into higher math and seeing the things come together and work out and so on. Is that
Mathematicians love to talk about an elegant proof.
Elegant proof.
In other words, how to reach from point A to point B in the most economic way. What are the minimal amount of logical steps that take you where you want to go? And mathematicians get this great sense that this is the proper form of proving something. Mm-hmm. You know, I only have a certain degree of feeling for all this.
But you've gone so far in it. To be halfway to a PhD is an awful long way to go for somebody who's only mildly interested.
It's true. It's strange. Yeah. But it was the road, finally, you know, when Simon and Garfunkel were touring and doing shows, it was the road that finally pulled me out of the Columbia campus. Yeah. And my heart's much more in the music. Although people will often talk about the connection between music and mathematics, I personally am not one of those people that sees so much of a connection.
Do you think they proceed from different parts of the brain even? There are musicians who are no good at math, so they aren't inevitably linked, apparently, are they?
No. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. It's interesting theories that have to do with what centers of the brain do what.
Yes. They aren't even sure that, well, the ones they think they're sure about will be occasionally removed in an accident or a shell explosion or something in the war. And they find that the body still does the things that they thought that part of the brain did, which is very odd. But now we're getting into still a third field, math, music, and mind. Is there a nostalgist somewhere who can hum or sing Hey Schoolgirl?
Oh, you know that, huh? Hey Schoolgirl is high school days. It's now quite some time ago.
How many know Hey Schoolgirl? Hands? One man put his hand up and quickly brought it back down. It was your first song.
Well, Paul Simon and I grew up together on Long Island, and as high school kids, we would sing together, and we cut our first record for a record company in real show business, as Steve Martin would say, in the late 50s. It was Hey Schoolgirl in the second row. The teacher's looking over, so I got to whisper way down low to say woo bop a lucha ba. Let's meet.
Woo bop.
Woo bop a lucha ba.
Oh, a lucha ba, yes.
That was the key. It was our version of Gene Vincent's Bebop a Lula, but we took off on it. And it was a hit. We were high school seniors with a hit record. We were Tom and Jerry in those days.
He isn't kidding. You used the name Tom and Jerry.
That's
and
right.
What was it on? A forgotten label?
Big Records.
Are you kidding? Big Records?
I remember. It's pink. It had stripes on it. Oh, it was a big part of our childhood, the two of us.
Well, didn't that put you in an entire other social category in high school to be
I was
suddenly
always in an entire other social category.
But this must have been still another dimension.
This was a justification of that, I would say.
But were you suddenly in demand, and weren't the girls petrified with admiration that you were a star, in a sense, at high school?
Be serious, Dick.
I'm trying to. No, I certainly, in my high school, if somebody had had a hit record, that would have been...
Oh, and senior year, too, when you are allowed to goof off, it was ideal.
Yeah.
Then we left it aside. Paul stayed with the record business, and I went on to more serious endeavors like architecture.
You didn't happen to read The Fountainhead at an impressionable age.
Exactly.
Are you serious? Because that happened to 15 people that I know.
I'm one of those victims.
Ayn Rand sent more boys into architecture than... Really?
Yeah.
Now, why is that? Is it because the power appeals to you when you read that book? I don't know that it's read anymore.
There's a Hollywood element in that book. It's sort of overly dramatic, and at an impressionable age, it will make its mark. It's funny, this has never come out here in front of all these people.
That's right. The Fountainhead did it too. And was architecture then a disappointment when you got into it in some way?
Yes, because while I was very interested in the image of the architect, I never had any great interest in designing or buildings or drawing. So the substance of it...
Those are almost essential, aren't they?
Of course. I do foolish things in my life.
But our investigators report that you were seen as a draftsman and carpenter at some earlier point in your life.
Yeah, I used to do some of that. Well, after 2 years of struggling through the school, I took a year off to go out into the field and see if I could do better in architecture from the work point of view rather than the school, which I did to some degree. Then I returned to the school 6 more months and gave it up. Wasn't my thing.
What about music today? I find it very confusing. It's a melange of all sorts of things. I find it hard to tell whether we're in an age of rock or rock gospel or gospel folk or rock folk gospel or... Stop me before I get obscene.
I think we're in an age where musically there is no cohesive mainstream. If anything is happening, it's the very absence of one thing happening. And so when that happens, then journalists come in and they make up things that are happening, or record companies pretend such and such is happening. We are talking about the music business.
Yeah.
The fact is, my connection with the rock and roll age, which is now some 20-something years old, starts from Chuck Berry and those early rock and roll masters, as I think of them. And if rock and roll means anything, it's about what has happened to those kinds of records with that kind of rhythm. Now, the Stones are alive and well, and they've taken it into the 70s. But there are not many people who make rock and roll, as I used to think of it, as mainstream rock and roll. Creedence Clearwater was such a group. They've we don't hear them much.
And yet the beat is still there, and when you turn on radio, you hear what at least it has to be categorized as rock and roll. But who killed the vital rock and roll? Or what? Did it just die?
I think all things, once the initial thing has a genuineness that appeals to people, those who do it 10 years later or 15 years later have sort of copyism built into their attempts. This takes some of the genuineness away. In a sense, I'm making a case for anything that's now 20 years further down the line is going to suffer somewhat.
Is it possible that if certain artists, maybe the ones you mentioned and others, hadn't come along way back at the beginning, that rock and roll would still be a black Southern term unknown to whites and still a thing that you had to travel south to hear? You know what I mean? Could it have happened that it never burst out into the general public the way it did?
It's hard for me to imagine that, because I was this teenage kid when rock and roll, rhythm and blues came to New York via the Alan Freed radio show. And it's hard to imagine that something that exciting would never have surfaced. It was this great alternative to Patti Page records and 4-Ace records. That was 4 Aces.
I hope you have nothing against the ink spots.
I do put people down indiscriminately.
How old are you, Art?
36.
Do you mind our knowing?
36.
Yeah. Yes, it is hard to imagine our youth without it, but, well, there's a sound that you had with Paul Simon that has never really been duplicated, may have been imitated, but it's a distinctive sound. It was often referred to as a sweet sound without being insulting. Not saccharine, not cloying, whatever. But as with all things like that, somebody had to invent it. Did you sit down together and think, now, shall we sound this way or that way? No, this way.
Not quite so theoretically, but as a matter of what kind of feedback we heard as we rehearsed and how we would shape the sound, yes. What worked for us well, and I think this works for a lot of people, is getting a very early start. You know how they say, as the tree is bent in the early age, so it grows. We were bent trees at early ages. I mean, we developed our sound as like 13 and 14-year-olds. And because it was such an early thing and we were impressionable at that age, we could sort of get a fix musically as singers in the same sense. And we'd rehearse as kids in each other's basements with staring straight at each other's mouth, and if he would say a T and his tongue would hit his palate just a certain way, I would copy that diction.
To get that amazing synchronization that you had.
Yes, that helps for accuracy.
Yeah.
Harmonically, it was just a matter of what appeals to you. I work a lot for musical people here in major thirds and minor thirds, and also often I would do sixths. If Paul was singing in a key that was too low, I would jump up a sixth interval, which is almost an octave. That tends to have a kind of a sweet sound if you sing it a certain way.
Were you ever tempted to suddenly vary it and switch hit on the public and
sure.
make a dazzling experiment in
Well,
changing
Bridge
style?
Over Troubled Water was a whole other formula. I sang solo. Paul joined on the third and final verse doing an underneath harmony, and that was a change. Oh yeah, we did all the combinations. As a harmonist, I used to love to take one of the lines that Paul was singing and then start from below him and go through the line and above. I see music as just that kind of thing. Different lines that have shapes.
Yeah. Have you had pressure on you all along to come up with your first song that you've written yourself? There seems to be pressure on every musician to, if he doesn't write the song, then he doesn't get full credit.
Why do they do that to me?
I don't know.
It's true. They want to see what songs you have inside of you, as if everybody has songs inside of them. I don't have songs inside of me.
Nobody blamed Judy Garland for not writing Over the Rainbow.
That's right. Occasionally I write a poem. Evidently I have things I want to say, and I want to fashion them and put them down and show them maybe to one or two close friends. But I don't have a desire to write songs and show them to the world. And when occasionally I do have a shot at it, it's kind of C+. Or
C+?
yeah, it's not great.
Who grades you, yourself, or do you show it to someone?
Myself.
Uh-huh.
What I should do is write anonymously. One of these days I'll write a tune, and only I'll know it's me, and I'll see what happens to it.
If it succeeds, will you take credit or let that be anonymous too?
It's a good question, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I'll find some clever way of taking credit.
Say, could you find a clever way of performing for us, or maybe I could find a clever way of asking you to?
Sure.
One always hesitates to at what are known as these prices. I
Sure,
wonder where
Dick.
that phrase goes, all the way back since I've heard radio music. I hate to ask you to sing at these prices, but
Sure,
if you would do so, the only thing I have to caution you about in singing here is that if you don't remove the microphone, you will rip up the carpet, the stairs, and the building next door. Art Garfunkel.
Don't know much about history, don't know much biology, don't know much about a science book, don't know much about the French I took, but I do know that I love you, and I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be. Don't know much about geography, don't know much trigonometry, don't know much about algebra, don't know what this slide rule is for, but I do know 1 and 1 is 2, and if this one could be with you, what a wonderful, wonderful world this would be. What a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful world. student, baby, baby, I could win your love for me. Don't know much about the Middle Ages. Looked at the pictures and I turned the pages. Don't know nothing about no rise and fall. Don't know nothing about nothing at all. Girl, it's you that I've been thinking of. And if I could only win your love, what a wonderful, wonderful world this would be. What a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful world. What a wonderful, 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 wonderful world.
You did so well, you get to wear the microphone again.
Can I have my napkin and my spoon?
That's a really nice song.
It's a cute song.
Are you, will that be in your tour? You're about to solo around the great country.
Yes, that'll be the 5th song in our show. I'm touring with my musician friends behind me and a couple of other people, and we're starting in about 2 weeks, and I'm very up for it. It's a real big deal for me to go around the country and tour as a solo artist. I've delayed doing it for some 7 years. I have great excitement for it, frankly.
Yes, they're out there waiting for you. Do you have any thoughts, Art, on what success did to you? It must have come stupefyingly fast, as it does to musicians, where suddenly you're just gold is showered down upon you, and including literal gold in terms of what you had 6 gold records, I think.
Yeah, about.
Yeah.
I could ask you the same question. It's very hard to assess how our lives are changed once we're in the public spotlight and we achieve this popularity. It's hard to get a grip on it because you need to sort of step out of your own skin and take a look for a couple of months before you see what's happening. Paul Simon and I were talking about this the other night. He was saying, we sure pay a price, and it's hard to assess what the price is we pay, but he was saying some of the things I realize are we never rest. As soon as one project's finished, we're on to the next. We hang out with friends who are pretty much in the same business, and while that it appears to be an advantage, it has its drawbacks, you know.
Yeah. What about the money part of it? Did you find that beyond your wildest dreams when it started to roll in, and suddenly you had accountants, and your accountants had accountants, and there's always a suspicion of the accountants' accountants, and all of that?
Yeah, when you start making a lot of money and you see that you're going right through your ceiling of expectations, it's an awakening thing. But I look at the money as a lucky thing that means I don't have the problems that happen when you don't have money. To me, that's what money is.
People in your profession that have cracked up with success or died, like Janis or Jimi Hendrix and others, can you point to any one thing that did it? Do you think they were doomed to begin with, or did success do it to them?
I don't know, Dick. It's a hard question.
Yeah.
I know when Janis died, I always suspected it had something to do with the loss of trust in the people she trusted. People were beginning to eat away at the reputation of those people that she trusted, and that trust that she placed was a very important part of her stability, I guess. So trust, I think, is a real problem. A real problem, I think, is separating what's real from what's not real, because there's much commotion, noise, chaos, and ego flattery that surrounds the performer that's making it, and lots of exploitation. And then there are lots of people who will keep an inner circle of flattery around you so that you never really do get a chance to have fair perspective on what's going on.
Yeah, and it strikes me that it's just as dangerous when you talk about the flatterers, people who compliment you too much, and you realize they're doing that, can make you doubt the things that actually are good that you're doing. You know, I mean, you lose track of what am I trying to say? It's very hard to distinguish a true compliment from flattery, or praise from overpraise. And you begin to wonder, is anything that you do any good? Or is it all just flattery and
This
praise?
is why you and I are in the shape we're in right now.
That's right. What time's your analyst appointment? Actually, I don't go to one because I don't need one. I never have, and I don't know why you suggested it. Did you feel at the time you were, let's say first making it, or the first couple of years when you were big, any of that pressure that the public figures of that age have of being a good example to the young? I know there was a certain amount of pressure I would feel when I would have a music star on the show to, try to get them to talk against drugs, for example, or, that sort of thing. Did you feel you carried a burden of youth idol with you?
Yes and no. No, in the sense that I believe people think for themselves, and teaching people or instructing them is phony. Once somebody is 14 or 15, he pretty much has a mind of his own, I think. Mm-hmm. But I would say yes in the sense that on stage I would frequently take the feeling of it's my job to make sure these people are entertained, and you almost acquire a babysitter's attitude to a certain degree. You want to make mm-hmm. sure that things don't get out of hand, that crowd control is okay. If you ever saw that film where that Altamont killing,
yes,
where the Stones are on stage, you see Jagger immediately switch gear and become very paternal and very concerned that he can guide this happening through some kind of less than totally frantic conclusion. Mm-hmm. And you see that other gear is always there, that feeling of, in case things get serious, you are the one on stage, all eyes are on you, and you have to keep things under control. So there is that inner responsibility about giving them a model that's an inspiration. When music is great, it's inspiring, it's uplifting, and as a person you want to keep that attitude.
Can you remember who first agreed that you and Paul had to break up? Who began who said it's all over?
Neither of us, both of us. It's sort of, I don't remember how it actually happened.
Can't remember the moment, if it were a novel in which you...
There was no moment, that's why I can't remember it. There was just an understanding that the last album was not as much fun, and that there were other things to be done, and it was some kind of mutually understood thing that diverging is the thing to do at this moment.
Mm-hmm. You must have gotten advice from every side that you were ruining your lives, ruining your careers, ruining the accounts of those who depended on you.
Not quite so, Dick.
None of that?
No, people who knew us or who worked with us knew our natures. They know what kind of manipulation is impossible, and they knew that there was something inevitable and right about two grown men doing exactly what they want to do.
I think there would have to be some emotional scars, though, for a thing like that, because the fact is I don't want to pursue the marriage analogy, but the fact is your work was something that was the combination of the two of you, and to turn away from it and know that it would never exist in the same form again, I think would be sentimental, if not wounding in a way.
Well, I always felt bad about it because when people would say, we love the sound of the two of you, I knew what they meant. Mm-hmm. I shared their feeling. I thought that we did fashion something that was nice. And so I kind of missed the duo as along with them. But there are other overriding concerns.
In the movie version, the contemptuous artist would simply say, hell, let them buy our separate records and play them simultaneously. Say, that's not a bad idea. I wonder how that... Do you each have a record that times out to the same number of seconds? Surely there was some pressure on you at some point to say nobody can be a star with the name Garfunkel.
I can't grasp, to this day, I have no grasp of my own name.
No one's name sounds to him like it does to other people. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, my name sounds to me, it's very hard. It's very hard to wear your own name. It's glommed onto you from the day you can have any sense of self-awareness, and you immediately feel that it's given to you. It represents nothing in you except that it was given to you from above or something. And I wear it in a very detached way.
No one ever asked you to change it. No one ever thought Simon and Beaumarchais would sound better than Simon and Garfunkel. No.
You're so witty.
Sorry, but yeah, isn't it amazing? Say, why are some people Garfinkel and others Garfunkel?
I've met a few Garfinkels, and I've never met a Garfunkel. So it's, my name is of Romanian derivation. But I wonder if it was once Garfinkel and they changed it.
Is it possible they spelled it wrong in your birth certificate and all those albums will have to be recalled? No, I guess not.
No, I'm assuming those kinds of questions don't require
No, those don't
answers,
require an answer. They answer themselves. You talked about the business earlier in a kind of contemptuous way, and demographics and charts and all of that. It is a cold-blooded business. I would think that would stifle the musical impulse sometimes if you have to meet so often with the businessmen and the accountants.
Yes, but you know, I'm always, in my mind, I'm always thinking of the two sides of an issue. And as you say that, suddenly it occurs to me, however, it is an impetus. Things that get you out of bed in the morning and keep you chugging along are pretty healthy. The idea that this is business, so it's profit-oriented, means that you set a deadline to finish that album by October rather than by the 80s. And there's something energy-giving about meeting deadlines, and even if it's the profit motive that is stimulating the record company, it serves as a device to keep you chugging along. Now, at a certain point, you say, maybe I've been running too long, or maybe I'm running mindlessly. And then you start thinking, well, maybe my running has a lot to do with generating profits and not necessarily an inner desire to express yourself.
Well put. Sometime come back and we just talk about all of the stuff that goes into the making of an album, because the idea that it can take a year to do what essentially people would think is stringing 8 songs together is fascinating, and there are people who are creatures simply of the studio. And
yeah, I'm sort of that way, because I look at the two sides as each 22 minutes, and each minute has 60 seconds. And each of the seconds, something should be happening.
We have 8 seconds left, only time for me to say something like you're as gracious and intelligent personally as you are musically.
All right. Say something like that.
Thank you, Art. Nice to hear you. See you, man.